Is it going to pop up?
There you go.
There it goes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's just get started. What is a culinary herb? Like we said, this is an area we're probably almost familiar with from our cooking. So these are those leaves, stems, or the flowers, those parts of the plant that are used in cooking or baking, because they have these compounds that are very aromatic and they give that flavor or fragrance to the food. But let's also keep in mind that we also use a lot of spices. And spices are technically from other parts of the plant. That's from the seed, the bark, the roots, or the fruit of the plant. And that's how you distinguish, is it an herb or is it a spice? And then some herbs cross over into that realm of vegetables. If we use a larger portion of them, or if they're providing nutrition or sort of a bulk to the dish, that would really be more considered a vegetable. And so that's just starting some groundwork as to what we're talking about and we consider an herb. And then again, you know, we like to put things in categories and boxes, but plants are just doing their own thing. So some plants are going to be used also as an herb, as a spice, as both, you know, depending on what part of the plant you're using. There you go. Okay. And so when we're talking about herbs, we're also not going to confuse that terminology with the term for an herbaceous plant. So in the botanical sense, herbaceous, meaning non-woody. We're talking about herbs, meaning culinary herbs. But if you were just to use the word herb, you could go either direction. So we'll clarify that. And there are several different herbs that are woody. They're not just herbaceous. And so some examples of those you may be familiar with: the sweet bay, thyme, rosemary, lavender. Those plants have some woody growth or semi-woody growth to them. And so they're not necessarily herbaceous, but they could be a culinary herb. All right, so let's march through the 10 reasons that I kind of picked out of the air for reasons that you might want to grow herbs, and I'm sure there are others. But the first number one reason for home gardeners is that they're easy to grow. Most herbs are pretty tough, culinary herbs. They require little fertilization. They tolerate poor soils. They can take full sun in our climate. They actually like it, they prefer it. And most of them are not too bothered by many insect pests because of all those strong aromatic compounds. Those are sort of their natural defense, pest defense mechanisms. And so not only does that make it taste good for us, but it also maybe makes it repellent or unattractive to an insect pest. So that's an excellent quality, that they're easy to grow. And a lot of the herbs that we use the most of are in that mint family. So those are characterized by square stems and simple opposite leaves. And they have those defensive oil glands that produces those aromatic compounds and oils that we enjoy eating or smelling. So if you're familiar with the mint family, you just take that stem between your fingers. You can feel the sides of the stems. You can feel it's a square stem without even cutting through it. So many herbs are easy to grow from seed. And here's some examples from seed to maturity from some common herbs. And so you can get a crop of basil in a little over a month. And so you can start picking leaves and harvesting your basil. And a lot of these herbs, also in the mint family, will readily self-seed. And so you can put them in the garden, they'll set new seed and they'll start new plants, will volunteer from self-seed. Now, when you're growing herbs from seed, you do want to be careful of those tap-rooted species. So stuff that makes long tap root does not like to be transplanted very well. They will resent that. You can cause their seedling to decline if you move it around too much. you disturb that taproot too much, or if you break that taproot when you're trying to transplant that seedling. So examples of that would be like anise and borage, cilantro, dill, and fennel. Those carrot family items, they make a taproot. So those things you want to be careful with when you're sowing from seed, that you're not transplanting them a whole lot. Things that I generally recommend from seed would be like rosemary, bay, or lavender. We used to sell lavender seed at Park Seed, and it was normally just a beast to try to get it to germinate properly so we could do our germination tests. And so it can be just much easier to buy a plant of those items. Save yourself some headache. Now, if you like a challenge, have fun, but go ahead and buy a plant of those. The other thing that's really easy about growing seed is most of them can be grown from cuttings or division. And so I've listed here some that are super easy from cuttings. Again, those things in the mint family, they're tough to get rid of, they're tough to kill, and so they do root real easy things. You can see this picture is just a basil cutting on my counter that was neglected way too long and has a massive root system. So normally you would pot this up before it got this big. You'd let it start some root systems and then continue on. But this was actually part of a little bouquet I had made myself at the end of the summer season, and it just kind of kept growing on its own because I forgot about it. But so very easy to root from cuttings in water or straight in soil. Things like basil, thyme, oregano, mint, catnip, scented geraniums. And then a lot of your herbs that you're using in your landscape, your permanent beds, you can divide very easily. Most of these would be good to divide in spring. And so you can just take a sharp spade and chop a lot of these straight through the middle, make 2 plants or make 4 plants, and repot them or share them or move them to another part of the garden. So that is one really great way to get new plants and to share plants. And just a reminder, when you're propagating, don't propagate patented plants. Especially for your sale. If you do a plant sale, you wouldn't want to do that. So basil in particular is one of the easiest and most popular herbs for people to grow. And I mean, I would venture to say it was always at Park Seed #1 selling herb seed. So I would venture to say it still is. Full sun, they are annual. You're going to spread them, space them 8 to 36 inches, depending on your cultivars. They are heat tolerant, and you do have some rabbit and deer resistance with basil. Bees, other pollinators love to visit basil flowers. They usually keep my bumblebees pretty happy during the summer. And basil, again, most popular herb because it's used so widely in all these different applications: sauces, salads, sandwiches, marinades, et cetera, et cetera. You can dry your own basil when you harvest it. You can puree up some pesto or, freeze it in some oil. So there's a lot of ways that you can keep your basil, and you can bring it indoors as well. At the end of the season, you can get yourself a cutting, root it, keep it as a house plant, as long as you have plenty of light. And then you can put it back out and enjoy it in the summer again. So, and we have, I don't know if I sent my resources to y'all, but I can send a list of all the links that I mentioned in the talk, and y'all can share that with the group. So, some different types of basil. Genovese is the typical that we think about most, I think, in American cooking, Italian cooking sometimes. Then there's the Greek basil with the tiny leaves. These are just adorable, I think. They look like little mini boxwood plants. And so we would use those in some of the decorative, landscape applications when we would plant up at Park Seed. So that's a kind of fun little guy. And then, basils also come in different colors. And so you have that red Reuben with that purple foliage, and that's a dual purpose basil. That's an All America Selections winner, I believe, as well, which means it's pretty tough. It's been trialed all over the country. So that's a good alternate to like a dark leaf sweet potato or a coleus. So you can do dual purpose. It'll be attractive, ornamental, and then you could also use it in your culinary. And then on the right here, I don't think I have a good picture of the flower of basil cardinal, but it makes a beautiful purple, bright purple bract around the flower, around the bloom. And that's a good, actually grown for cut flowers, that cardinal basil. So there's a really wide variety of basils, and so there's no need to be bored when you're growing basil. Okay, so we're on to number 2. We talked about easy, and I just used basil as my example for easy. The wide variety of flavors are available in culinary herbs. And so I think the one that has, maybe to me, some of the strongest flavor would be mint, and is just widely used as far as flavoring, but then as far as also cosmetic uses and other products, is used very widely across the commercial spectrum of products. Mint can be a bully, I guess I would say, in the garden. So it can take over, it can spread very far, be very aggressive. So you do want to be careful about where in your landscape you plant mint, because you may not be able to get rid of it if you're tired of it. So you want to keep it contained. It can grow stolons and underground rhizomes, like 6 to 8 even more inches. So you really, if you're going to put it in the landscape and you're not committed to where it is, you really want to either sink a large pot in that area to kind of keep it from spreading, or use a very deep divider in the landscape. I just tend to grow it in containers. It does pretty good in like a strawberry jar, or any kind of container really. And it also is very deer resistant and good for pollinators. And if you have a spot that you just really have bad soil and you just really want something to cover the ground there as a ground cover, mint might be a good option for you for that. And so, again, mint comes in several different varieties, flavors, cultivars. You can get them chocolate scented, orange scented. You got spearmint. There's even a pineapple mint that's like a variegated leaf. But you can see in that bottom left corner, there's mint, aggressive in one of my raised bed boxes and coming up through the boards. So it can get a mind of its own away from you. So keep that in mind. Now, cilantro is a love it or hate it flavor. So that's why I'm putting it in the variety of taste flavor category here. So the fun fact on this one is there is an actual I hate coriander day, right? Coriander is the other name for the seed of cilantro. So this is one of those herbs that fits the herb and the spice category, right? So we use the leaves as an herb, and we would use the seed of this plant as a spice, that coriander. That if you're going to grow a cilantro in our area, you want to put it in sun part shade. It likes a little bit of afternoon shade. Cilantro can be a little finicky, and it likes to bolt or go to flower when you look at it funny. So, I mean, it can be a little bit challenging in our area. Choose a cultivar like a slow bolt, or there's one called Santo that's been trialed pretty widely, and those will do better for you. You can grow it in the spring or the fall. Midsummer, you're not going to have good success. So keep that in mind. It is deer resistant, and it's best used fresh. I think for flavor culinary uses, I think that was the best use of the cilantro. Or if you're like some of that portion of population, it'll taste like soap and you don't want to grow it. So it just depends on, so I got a hand up. Some people think it tastes like soap and they just don't like it. So that's fine. I have an acquaintance, used to be a colleague of mine when I was working at Park Seed, that has grown in Florida culantro in place of cilantro because of their heat. They don't have as many, as good of a growing window like we do in the spring and the fall for the cilantro. And so if you have trouble with cilantro bolting and you really like it and you want to have some during the summer months, you might want to try culantro. It's a totally different species. It's an Eryngium species. And so you can, it's actually going to be a part shade item for you, which an herb that grows in part shade is very common. So that's a nice use as well. And it is deer and rabbit tolerant, and it's a little bit more pungent than the cilantro, but it's used in the same way, and it can be used in cooked dishes. The leaves are a little bit less fragile than a typical cilantro leaf. So, and I'll include that link to the Purdue website with a little bit more information about culantro with your resources. So number 3 reason that you might want to grow herbs, which I've already mentioned in some of our herbs, but they support pollinators. And so they can support pollinators with nectar, pollen, or as a host plant for the larval stages of butterflies and moths. Forage is one of the most well-known, I think, for as far as herbs are concerned, for a pollinator partner for a vegetable garden. When you want to attract pollinators to your garden, a lot of people will recommend you plant forage. And so it's very easy to grow from seed. It's a sun loving, but it can take some part shade. It will get 1 to 3 feet tall, and it does tolerate heat and drought. It is deer resistant, and the bees love it. And the leaves are edible. They have kind of a cucumber flavor, and the flowers are edible too. So you can add to salads and kind of dress up different sandwiches, salads, things like that. Dill is another one that's really well known as an herb that attracts pollinators. It's a great larval food source for butterflies, and it is deer resistant. It does attract other beneficial insects as well. You just want to make sure you plant plenty of dill if you're one of those butterfly gardeners. If you see a lot of butterflies in your garden, plant enough for them and for you, because if you've ever had a good crop of butterfly caterpillars, some larvae on your dill, then you know disappear in a hurry. Those little caterpillars can eat quite a bit. So plant plenty extra for them. And you are familiar with dill as that distinctive pickling flavor used in pickling. And this is one of those that the seeds can then also be used as a spice for the dill. So, and remember when we talked about growing from seed, dill is one of those taprooted species. It's in that carrot family. So you don't want to transplant it too many times. It will not like And fennel is also in that same family. Fennel is also one that ticks the box of the vegetable. So if you eat that swollen bulb at the base of the plant, it has a sort of a licorice, mild licorice flavor. That is used as a vegetable. Then you have the foliage that you can use as an herb, and then the seeds that you can use as a spice. This one is a full sun, and it is perennial. You can get, depending on the cultivar, you can get some that get 3 to 6 feet tall. There are also varieties that are dark leaved fennels, so you can get creative with the appearance of the cultivar. And they are good for deer and rabbit resistance. The butterflies love them. And yeah, so this one is a larval food source for the swallowtails. And this is one that can self-seed and kind of spread around the garden. So you might want to keep your eyes out for that. Okay, reason number 4 to grow herbs is that they're just attractive landscape plants. So even if you're not eating them, you can use them in your design and installations. I think thyme is a perfect example for this. Thyme is a great one for ground cover spaces between pavers, around walkways, trailing out of containers or over walls. And again, it's from that Mediterranean era and origin. So it's a tough plant. It likes a poor soil. It takes the drought and the heat. The only problem some of these Mediterranean herbs have is our humidity. But for the most part, they can do well for us in a lot of situations. And so these are perennial, and they come in a variety of different cultivars that have different leaf forms and colors. So you got the golden, you got the you've got green leafed. They are deer and rabbit resistant. The pollinators like the flowers. But the typical straight Thymus vulgaris is the one that is usually used culinary uses. So if you're wanting to dual purpose, then you would probably stick with that species. And that gives you that savory, woodsy flavor you can use in stews, sauces, meat dishes, etc. Rosemary is another great one for use in the landscape, being evergreen and attractive throughout the year. Again, so many different cultivars of rosemary. You can get trailing, upright, different flower colors on the rosemary. They're deer and rabbit resistant, and lots of use for rosemary. I like rosemary on potatoes. You can use it with meats and other things. But depending on the cultivar, 2 to 4 feet tall. It just depends on which one you select. 5 reason for growing herbs. And this is one that even that Park seed I really hadn't thought about much until I started working at the farmer's market. And one of the market growers was bringing microgreens. Excuse me. And so herbs can make a great microgreen grow. And so if you do have a good seed starting setup in your house and you have a grow light or a little area or a vent, you can start seedlings. Microgreens are a very quick and easy way to incorporate herbs. And this is a screenshot taken from Johnny's Seed, where they have a whole chart about microgreens and the different ones that they sell. And it's very useful, actually. It can kind of tell you how many days and some examples of what you can grow. But there's a whole bunch of herbs and edible flowers that you can grow for microgreens. And some of the common herbs are the basil, borage, cilantro, dill, fennel, garlic, parsley, and sorrel. And remember, when we talked about cilantro in particular, it doesn't like the heat of summer in our area and will bolt. So if you really like that cilantro flavor, microgreens is the way to go. You can grow your own cilantro microgreens and use those during the middle of the summer and the heat of summer when you can't grow it out in the garden. So that's a good way to go with that. Microgreens are super fun and easy, and you just need a good seed starting setup, some sterile seed media, and you just want to cut off the seedling when they get a few true leaves or about the size when you're ready to eat them. Start new crop depending on the species, every 2 to 3 weeks, and have fresh microgreens all summer long, all year long. Number 6 reason for growing herbs is that they're economical. To grow it for yourself saves you money. I really won't spend a whole lot of time on this, but a good example of that is chives. Invest in 1 plant of chives, and it is perennial. It is beautiful. It has these cute little purpley pink blooms in the springtime. It kind of reminds me of what is that Dr. Seuss book, The Truffula Trees, little tiny mini truffula trees. And they are drought tolerant, deer and rabbit resistant. For me, almost year round, I can go and harvest my chives. They'll get knocked back by a hard frost, but they're pretty resilient. And then this is a good one that you can divide the plant too. So this is a super economical and very useful. Add onion flavor at any time. Just head out to the garden and get some chives. So that's a good one for saving money. Deer and pest resistance. I mentioned this throughout the presentation already, so I've kind of spoiled this reason. But a good example of that I've listed as oregano. Again, this is one that is perennial. And it tolerates poor soils. It's a good ground cover. And it is attractive to pollinators if you do let it flower, if you don't keep it cut back. It has a great taste to add that kind of, again, woodsy flavor. Italian cooking, used a lot in sauces and stuff like that. And this is also one that I even harvest throughout the winter as well. So you can see some frost on my oregano here, but it'll keep going, and I can go out and get some almost all year round. Tarragon is another one that's really good for deer resistance. And it's a perennial. It gets to be about 2 to 3 feet tall. And it has that kind of bittersweet anise flavor that you get a lot in like French cooking. And honestly, this is not my favorite flavor. I don't like tarragon. So it just depends on your personal preference.
Is it easy to grow from seed?
Grown tarragon from seed.
Me either.
So I don't have a good answer for that.
Okay.
I'd have to look and see what my ball book says. I'll let you know.
Okay.
Lemongrass is a fun one. It's kind of stretching it for culinary use, but you can use the young shoots, the base of the shoot, for Asian cooking, and kind of gives a lemon flavor. But this is one that, you know, the ornamental grasses are really usually pretty deer tolerant because a lot of the blades are pretty sharp. If you run your fingers up against it, it's not something that the deer wants to chew on. And it doesn't have very many insect pests. So that's kind of a nice, maybe this would have fit in the good ornamental section as well. But, you know, some of these herbs have so many characteristics, it's hard to know where to stick them. Yeah. But that's a fun one. And it's supposed to be lemony. I can't think of what the chemical is that it has in it, but it's also supposed to be somewhat mosquito repellent as well. Lemon balm. Again, in that mint family, this one will take some part shade and gets 1 to 2 feet tall. So similar in growth habit to like a mint or an oregano. And the lemony leaves of this one can be used in like soups or salads or teas. And then this is another one you need to watch out for it spreading or reseeding. It can get away from you. Number 8, fragrant herbs. So 80% of what we taste is coming from their scent, the smell of what we're tasting. And so the fragrance of the herb is really doing the work in our enjoyment of it. And one that I grew up with a lot, because my grandmother was Italian and cooked her own pasta sauce all the time, was bay leaf. She always stuck a bay leaf in whatever she was cooking and then fished it out before she served us. And so this is a nice little attractive tree that you can, it's evergreen, that you can grow and incorporate in your landscape. Sort of the way you might incorporate like a small camellia or something like that. Think of that use in your landscape. It's a shrub. And it's a little bit slower growing. So it can reach 10 feet, but it will take some time. It is deer and rabbit resistant. And again, the leaves, you don't actually consume them. You use it to impart the flavor and then remove them. Chamomile, this is a good one. Also, the fragrance, the essence is used more so than consuming it. So use the flowers actually of this herb in teas and cosmetics. And this one is deer resistant. Pollinators love it. Again, poor soil, sandy soil. This is an annual, easily grown from seed and can reseed also in the garden. Bee balm, this is a great garden plant for sun or part shade. It is perennial and it does tolerate our clay soils and our moist soils. So we like that. Deer and rabbit resistant, and butterflies and hummingbirds love the flowers. So culinary, you can use the leaves and the blossoms in teas and salads, and it kind of gives like a flowery, lemony, citrusy taste. And it does spread via stolons. So it's a good kind of upright, I guess, ground cover, fill in your perennial border. And it will reseed as well. Lavender, again, this is more for fragrance. So you can use the flowers and fragrances or syrups, cosmetic items. There's actually a local coffee shop here that does a lot with, they make their own lavender syrups, and you can get the drinks, the very drinks they have with the homemade lavender syrups. Lavender's good. And sun, part shade, perennial, and you just need to think about what species you're going to plant, because the English lavender doesn't like our humidity very well. You can stick with something like a Spanish lavender and you'll have better success in South Carolina. Okay, and so herbs are problem solvers. Deer are problems, but herbs are problem solvers. And we've mentioned this in several of the different categories already. And some of the herbs I've talked about, there are herbs that tolerate poor soil, that take drought, that take our heat. There are herbs that are good for ground covers, that are great on slopes. And there are some herbs that you can use in shade as well. So sage is a good one. I think that's a good problem solver. It tolerates all these poor soils, and it can be used as a good ground cover in those little niches of poor soil where you have maybe a corner of a bed that's just nothing else will grow. Sage is a good option for that. It's deer resistant. And it's really good for like stuffings and meats and savory dishes like that. Sage is another one that has, there's a lot of different cultivars that you can find for colors of the leaf and so forth. Like that's a tricolor one. There's others as well for sparse sage. And then shade, because we haven't really talked about a whole lot of herbs that can grow in shade. This one is called Sweet Cicely, and it's good for shade or part shade. It's perennial, it's deer resistant. It's for a moist shady spot, so not a dry shade. It has like an anise or licorice kind of flavor. And it can be used kind of like a natural sweetener. Think of along the lines of stevia, maybe sort of like that. But it can be one of those aggressive plants. It does have a deep taproot and it can reseed. So it can spread itself around if you have that moist, shady location that it likes. And sweet woodruff is the other example I have for something good for shade. It's perennial and it again likes that moist shady spot. It is kind of like a hay scented and used to flavor teas and punches. So it's really, I mean, it's a stretch as far as its culinary. I don't think people use it a whole lot. But if you want something useful that'll take shade, woodruff is something to try. Number 10, and I'm sorry, we're close to the end of our time, so that's good. We're coming along right for number 10. Herbs are very container friendly. And so folks with small gardens or no garden space, herbs can be grown in containers and most of them tolerated just fine. Parsley, I think, is an excellent example of this. Parsley is very useful in a bunch of different dishes or as a garnish. But there's different types of parsley. You can get the curly or the flat leaf. Again, this one is in the carrot family, so it does have a taproot. It is a food source for butterfly larvae again. So if you have if you have room, plant extra. Some for them, some for us. This one, if you're going to grow from seed, it can be very finicky and slow. Not to say that it's hard. Just know that it kind of will be on its own time. So it can take a longer time to germinate. If you soak it overnight before you sow it, that'll help it speed it along. And a lot of things in the carrot family are kind of like that with starting from seed. And so that takes me to my resource list, which I will email to you folks, and then you can share it with each other. And then I also wanted to invite you to the next, I think that's the next talk I'm doing is January 6th, and it's going to be at 12 noon. They're talking about native plants and incorporating them in your landscape. And that is through our Clemson Hort team program. And so I can add that link to whatever I send out. It's on our Clemson calendar, or if you follow the horticulture Facebook page, it'll be on their event page as well. So those are different ways that you can find that. You can email me directly too, and I can send you the link as well. Yeah.
I have a question about native plants, and that is the, I believe that there is a native bay in South Carolina, but I don't know which one and how it is different from the one that we eat.
Oh, yeah, there's
I know it's in the Low Country.
Yeah, and I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's like a bay laurel and it's related.
So it's edible. So it's edible.
I'll have to include that in my talk because I haven't haven't put it in there. So let
Okay, let me know.
me find
But-
out and try to include it in my talk, and then I'll send you some. info.
Yeah, and then the next thing I wanted to add is that I have read that lavender lotions will soothe infants and geriatric people. And the study that I read had to do with just rubbing lavender on geriatric feet patients, just on the feet, and it would calm people down. And I wonder, of course, is it just the rubbing of the feet or is it really the lavender? But
Well, yeah, that's funny that it's feet, because normally it's like the fragrance, right? So the smell of lavender is supposed to be calming.
right. Maybe that's what they were trying to eliminate, but it's been a while since I read that, but I was fascinated with that whole idea
Mm-hmm.
that it would calm people.
Yeah, and I really don't, like, my background is not really in the use of some of these,
Right.
that a lot of the essential oils that people take out of all the different herbs.
Yes, yes.
There's a lot of different uses from that angle. And I don't really have that,
Right.
but yeah,
Interesting stuff.
yeah, it's very interesting. All those aromatic compounds. And it gets really deep horticulture wise. Like if you were to grow basil as a crop, and you change the light quality and the light concentration, it'll change the aromatic compounds in the basil.
Wow.
And so they are doing research that fine tunes that so that the production's good, but also that the basils taste good and is palatable for what people prefer. And so it can get really intricate when you're studying those compounds.
It's chemistry.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we had a comment, someone said is red bay is the plant. So again, I'm not sure. I'd have to come back to y'all.
Okay.
I'm Don McInnes.
Ah,
I'm gonna stop
thanks.
He knows. He knows.